Hello and welcome to Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Join us as we explore the tools and insights you need to jumpstart your financial journey. Before everything, we have this just in. The Bangko Sentral na Pilipinas has cut its benchmark interest rate by 25 basis points to 5.5%, in line with market expectations, marking its fourth rate cut since August 2024. This brings total monetary easing to 100 basis points as the central bank shifts to a more accommodative stance amid slowing inflation and weaker global growth outlook. Our correspondent Soo Jin Kim reported that the BSP also adjusted the interest rates on the overnight deposit and lending facilities to 5% and 6% respectively. Inflation fell to 1.8% in March, the lowest since 2020, while risk-adjusted forecasts for 2025 to 2027 have been revised downward. The Monetary Board noted that risks to inflation are now broadly balanced, with downside risks linked to lower global demand and tariff reductions on rice imports. Despite the cut, the central bank signaled that more easing may follow. Governor said they contemplate more cuts this year and will do it in baby steps of 25 basis points at a time. BSP officials also said there is still room to make monetary policy less restrictive to support economic growth and close the output gap. The central bank said it will remain data dependent in its pursuit of price stability and sustainable economic expansion. On to our interview now. The global trade chessboard just shifted, with the U.S. President Donald Trump hitting pause on new tariffs for 90 days, but raising duties on Chinese goods to 125%. The Philippines is caught in a high-stakes opportunity. How we respond could redefine our place in the global supply chain. Joining us on Follow the Money is Dr. Alvin Ang, economist and former president of the Philippine Economic Society, to walk us through what's at stake and what strategic moves the Philippines should consider now. Dr. Ang, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Follow the Money.
Yeah, thank you, Raine, for the invitation.
We appreciate you being here. With Trump, of course, pausing tariffs for 90 days, how should the Philippines perhaps recalibrate trade and industrial policy to maximize this window?
You're right. No, this is a very important window. That does not mean that after 90 days that the original 17% will not be pursued and it's the reciprocal for the rest of the world. So that means that at this point, it's very critical that the government goes back and look at all the potential impacts. We have been given time to look at the opportunities. Where can we take advantage? Where are we losing? And how we can calibrate those areas like what you're showing right now. The tariffs that will be hitting us most will be in the area of electronics, where about 13 billion, the whole U.S. Basket of our exports about 13%, and 13% will be exposed to higher tariffs. So that is where we also need to work within the government and also with our trade partners.
Of course, the Philippines is still a net importer, if I'm not mistaken. And how can the Philippines perhaps position itself as a more attractive U.S. trade partner now that Chinese goods face 125% in tariffs?
Well, there is an opportunity for trade diversion. Unfortunately, our options are, our products are limited. What the U.S. is buying from China is almost everything. And what we sell into the U.S. basically are those that are focused on the electronics value chain. So the key there is really to take advantage of this area wherein the value chain is closer to us, because that is where we already have the competitive advantage.
Are there key reforms or support that should be extended to vulnerable sectors like electronics, as you mentioned, and perhaps even agriculture during this truce?
Well, in theory, there should be some kind of financial support to these firms, but at present, our current fiscal position does not or is limited to do some kind of an export subsidy, to continue this. But I think what is the more important strategy right now is really to go back into the drawing boards and look at the different products that we are exporting, not only to the US, but to the rest of the world. Because this, whether the president Trump pauses for this or continues with it, the whole global order has been reorganized already. That means even after 90 days, we still have to think about looking at different trade negotiations. This will be a very complex world where we need to do trade renegotiation with each of our trading partners. And so this is where the 90 days gives us a respite to go and look at all of this, because the lines are now blurred, right? So it's not like the WTO rules will not work this way right now, because it has been blurred by these tariff announcements.
Dr. Ang, is President Trump in the right in imposing the kind of tariffs that he has, or he still wishes to push in within 90 days, especially against China's 125%?
Well, I think this is like uh, this like a blinking game. Who blinks first, right? China blinked and was reciprocating instead of negotiating. I think what the US was expecting was countries were going to negotiate with them the rates. And this is what happened for many of the countries, but China was the only one who announced immediately a reciprocal tariff. And so this is that what you're seeing right now is that the US implemented that pause because they want to renegotiate for the rest of the world that were willing to negotiate with them.
Of course, the Philippines has already signaled that it will not reciprocate, or it will not retaliate in terms of tariffs. Would we be right in doing so?
Well, in the first place, we also are a net importer. So if we do that, if we remember, the WTO rules have not been rescinded. I mean, they're still WTO. So if you do that to one country, you have to do it for the rest. And so if we increase the tariff, then the rest of the countries that we're trading in, we will also have to impose tariffs on them. So this is what we don't want to happen. An escalation, and then where each country will put tariff against each other, higher tariffs, then it will make the cost of goods higher for the rest of the world. Just like what you announced, what you reported, the BSP just announced the rate cut because we have a very rosy inflation picture. But if this trade war escalates, tit for tat kind of response by different countries, it could cause higher inflation in the future.
In which case, you were saying if you implement a tariff rate for one country, you'll have to implement it with the others. But should the Philippines then push for more bilateral FTAs with not just the US, but more countries, or go sectoral to address key industries faster?
Yeah, well, as I said, you have to go back to the drawing boards, because either way, I mean, sectoral, we are very limited as well because our export market is very limited. So what you can do is really, because we are a net importer, we have to work with the ASEAN, for example, because we have already in ASEAN a zero tariff regime. It's has been in effect since 2015. So we have to work with our ASEAN partners, and just like I think right now they are meeting, the ASEAN trade ministers are meeting because we need to have like a common stand here, because this is an opportunity as a region to work together. Individual countries trying to work this on their own will have very challenging um, repercussions, because you have to negotiate per country. And since the Philippines is basically in the global value chain centered in ASEAN, we have to negotiate with each of the countries that are involved in this value chain. So that will become a very complicated process for us.
Dr. Ang, do you see what kind of results do you see from these ASEAN dialogues or even regional dialogues? Do you see more synergies happening from among the regions, more exclusion of the U.S. In the whole value chain?
But that's not easy, and it will not likely happen in the next 5 years, even if they decide that that will be the case. So what is most likely going to happen is that there will be a rebalancing, but it's more prospective rather than now. What is happening now is every country will react, and every country will try to and maybe use the word salvage the position that they have to make sure that whatever contracts have been made will be honored, and even if that price will be implemented, they just have to make do with that for the moment.
Dr. Ang, do you see this pause or perhaps, the pronouncements of the U.S., the moves lately? Is this an opportunity to fast track industrialization for our own country and maybe reduce dependence on volatile trade partners, and not just the U.S.? Would you consider China as a volatile trade partner at this time?
Well, I mean the whole world now is a volatile trade partner basically, but we are where we are closest in ASEAN. We should work around that because that is where the common, mostly common products, common systems are already being harmonized for the last more than 20 years. So it's easier to work along that line. But within the Philippines, you're right. We cannot also just work regionally. We also have to do our own internal activities. For example, what are the things that the Philippines need to do? We have to work on our ease of doing business. Even if we have the lowest 17% tariff being passed on to us by the U.S. That doesn't mean that the trade diversion, every country that has higher tariffs will go to us. It simply means that we still need to do a lot of homework because the ease of doing business still very difficult. It's very tough. Um, Tariff is not the only reason why countries do FDIs. There are other more important processes. For example, as like I said, ease of doing business, infrastructure, logistics. These still are the main challenges that the Philippines that pushes the Philippines way beyond or below the preference, for instance, for Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia in ASEAN.
Of course, ease of doing business is something that a lot of the industry groups, as well as the foreign chambers, have continued to push for every time we dialogue with them. But also, this move for the U.S. to bring back manufacturing to the U.S., a lot of people were quipping that perhaps Americans don't want to do the factory work in the first place. But there is a point towards workforce development. How should workforce development evolve, perhaps, to match the demands of shifting global supply chains?
Well, what the U.S. really wants to do, it's not really going to happen overnight. The reshoring, as we call it, is not simple that it will just move because of the tariff. Um, Even if these industries go back to the U.S., they will still have to work through the value chain. It's For example, look at the iPhone. For example, about 50% of the value chain of the iPhone is U.S. When you put a tariff of an average, let's say about 30-40% to the members of the value chain, then you make the product very expensive. So it's either that the U.S. Consider working on just increasing it from 50 to 60, or are they willing to really move everything there and it makes it more expensive? So it's not this the process actually um, um, put in context the importance of competitive advantages. And the U.S. knows this. I don't think they are unaware. They simply want to rock the boat and say that, there are things that we still can do. And I think by putting the tariff, they are saying some things can go back, some things will remain. And so that's why the after effect of this is more important because it will require a lot of renegotiations. And this is where the Philippines will have to work very hard. So it's a big homework. And most of these negotiations will have to go through some kind of trade agreements and treaties where many of our legislators have to work on. And so this becomes also very important as we come into the election season.
But Dr. Ang, do you see Trump's move as real economic, activity towards, improving the budgets, the budget deficit of the U.S., and not just a political maneuver or even a market maneuver? Because every time he says something, the market jumps or falls. Is it? But although he, of course, the United States has denied making that kind of maneuver. In which case, does it make it? Does it make the Philippines the pressure the Philippines to actually balance its relationship with the U.S. and China? What's the strategy to diversify exports and avoid over-reliance on a single country? We can even talk about defense in this regard.
Well, actually, our exports in terms of countries are already diversified. So we're not focused on the US, not China. We are diversified because of the value chain, because the chains are in different places. But when you say diplomacy, that's another thing. Because the challenge is if we were worried or I mean worsen the strategic balance right now in trade, that is the reason why you will also have to need to balance the geographical geopolitical environment. So I should say that's why we need very good negotiators here. We need people to really look at the details and understand the impact, not just now, but moving forward. Because as I said, this is a new world, new world order, going back to protectionism. And even if the semblance of globalization will remain, it will not be as it was the business as usual as we know for the last 30 years.
All right, still a lot of questions, but we have to pause for a few reminders. And when we come back, we'll ask Dr. Ang, is this tariff truce our chance to turn trade tension into further opportunity for ourselves? Stay on BNC and follow the money. Welcome back to Follow the Money. We're still with economist and former president of the Philippine Economic Society, Dr. Alvin Ang. Dr. Ang, we just heard from the Management Association of the Philippines. They were saying that, businessmen, MSMEs, they really shouldn't, rest on their laurels when it comes to those tariffs because if they have even single-digit profit margins, they're going to get hit really hard by that 17% reciprocal tariff of the U.S. What would you advise to MSMEs, in preparation, especially if they're, export-driven or import-driven businesses? What would you advise to them to prepare for these tariffs?
Well, if they are single digit, like what they said, profit margin, at the moment, that would be very tough. So, of course, what the most important thing to do right now is to look for markets, alternative markets of the same products. Uh, for MSMEs, most of those that will be hit are those in the area of garments, processed food, and the likes, right? So it's not really the electronic sector because they are in the bigger global value chain. So that those will take care of themselves. But for the smaller ones, what the government can do, and they have to work with government to find new markets and to rebrand if needed, or to look for better terms in terms of their import and export payments and processes. So this is not easy, as I said. That's why I have to really go back to the drawing boards and work with government in trying to see whether this can be there can be diversion, there can be new markets, or uh, it's really that the government, or they just have to absorb for the meantime and prepare for it next year, because the implementation is abrupt. It's already here, right? So even the ADB forecast for 2025, 2026, the adjustment this year is kind of difficult. It's going to be a next year process that you are looking at.
So right now, for March, 1.8% was the inflation. Are you expecting a significant jump in inflation in the coming months?
Not in the sense that that many of the, I mean, for example, food items that we import are already committed, and they're not coming from the U.S. per
Yeah.
se, right? So there's no reciprocity there. What we are trying to, or what we are worried about in the medium term, maybe within a year, is that if the prices of goods outside started to increase and we are importing them, then that will be passed on to us. When that will be, we don't know. Maybe not in the next 3-4 months, definitely, but after that, and so that's why this pause of 90 days gives us about 3 months, right? So then we could see that it can be further down the road. So if there's any pressure that will be created by these tariffs, it will not be happening in the next 5-6 months. Maybe after that, if nothing has changed, just a pause, and it will be implemented.
In which case, of course, the BSP originally was mulling a 50 basis point cut this year. 25 already happened today, was already decided on today. Another 25, but that can take a few months then before we actually see those cuts, that remaining cut.
Yeah, of course, they have to observe inflation. It's all they are able to do it because inflation is falling. So, well, that's the expectation that is going to fall. But again, we don't have much control over the external markets, and if our importation remains at the same level, then we are exposed to the same level of risk of inflation that can come from such an environment.
These conversations that the government has to have with a lot of the stakeholders as they craft their trade responses. Are there risks that might be involved there? And you were saying earlier, it's not supposed to be just in the 90 days that we're supposed to come out with a particular decision. There's a huge homework, and how soon should we be coming out with a particular response to the U.S. Tariff policy?
Well, you have seen our neighbors in ASEAN; they already have made their statements.
Yeah.
So that means they
Singapore
have
pretty
prepared.
strong.
Yeah, and they have prepared for it. They knew, because Trump, when he won, he already announced that they will do these things, right? So that means it's a matter of the percentages. So that means we are actually a bit delayed in our response. So we have to fast track it. Now that we know the numbers, we can track it down and see where it's going to affect us, and how we can divert, or how we can work with the U.S. If we can request for a tariff reduction. So that those are possibilities. This is not a zero sum game that we just reciprocate or just wait and let it come to us, right? So we have to work on it, because, for example, the Vietnamese government immediately called President Trump. So after 90 days, what if Vietnam's tariff is down to 10. So that 17% that we were saying that we are the lowest in ASEAN will no longer be true, right? So that is something that we have to work very hard on to. There's also a negotiation with the government. With the U.S. government, and there's also our internal looking at our internal processes. Where are we going to be affected, and how can we respond if we have limited resources? How can we help our exporters? Those things have to be done, and not wait when things are going to rough, when the seas are rough now.
On that note, with the U.S. tariff pause and rising tensions with China, of course, the Philippines must act fast to industrialize, diversify, and diplomatically position itself for long-term trade resilience. Dr. Alvin Ang, professor of economics at the Ateneo de Manila University, and of course, Economic Society former president. Thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights today. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Raine.
Thank you, sir. And before we go, here's a view on tariffs by the director of the World Trade Organization, Ngozo Okonjo-Iweala, who says you don't fix the trade imbalance by raising tariffs. You fix it by becoming more competitive. And that is it for today's edition of Follow the Money. I'm Raine Musñgi. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel, always on top.